Hi guys, and welcome back to the Backstage Bikini podcast, or more like welcome to me and Grace coming back to the Backstage Bikini podcast. But today we have a long-awaited guest, really. That this is somebody that we've wanted to get on for quite some time. It feels like the perfect time to actually have this discussion, back end of the competing year. All the shows are sort of starting to dribble out a little bit now, but you should know her. She is one half of the Flourishing Society. She is a nutritionist, a CBT practitioner. We've got Charly Pickstock on the podcast. Hi, Charly.
Hello, guys. Thank you so much for having me. That was a really lovely intro, and it's so good to be here. Obviously, listen to the podcast myself. I think what you guys are doing, what you talk about on the podcast is great. So it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, shocked we haven't got you on sooner, because everything that you talk about and with the Flourishing Society, like it always comes up with people off the back of certain podcasts, post show, and even stepping away from competing. So like Jade said, it's very, very fitting for this time of year. And yeah, loads of people have even been in touch recently with us about it. So yeah, we're buzzing to have you on. But to get started, give the listeners, because I've been following you for quite some time. I followed you back in the competing days when you had the blonde hair. But do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, Charly, how you got into the industry? I think it was quite a long time ago, but just give us a good rundown of that.
Yeah, gosh, yeah, it seems like a different lifetime ago now, and I think this is important because I probably think if people listen to this, you probably didn't know me back then. So I think this is quite really relevant. So yeah, I began competing nearly 10 years ago now. So I started my first prep in 2013, and I did my first show in 2014. And as you can probably imagine, the industry has changed massively over that time. Like I've seen so much go down in that time. So yeah, I began around then, and it was very kind of off the cuff. I'd just been training for a little bit, and I was like, you know what, I've come from a dancing background, and someone said to me, oh, you would be great in a bikini show. I'd always been quite broad, had good delts from lifting and dancing, and my body was responding well to training. So I thought, oh, this is interesting. Didn't even know what it was. Just Googled it, and the UK BFF show came up. So just turned up at that show. Didn't even peak, just kind of trained for a bit, and then turned up at this show. Came third, went to the British, and then that was kind of it. Then I kind of ended up on I ended up competing with pretty much every federation. So I did a big stint with NABA and the WFF internationally, to compete in like South Africa at the Worlds, the Universe in France, the Europeans in Spain twice. And then obviously our kind of PCA took a little bit of a hiatus, competed with the PCA, and then the MPC, obviously when they came over with Two Bros and all of that kind of changed. I ended up competing in 15 shows, the time that I competed, and there's only one time I ever placed out of the top three. So I was competitive during that run. When I competed with the MPC, I was consistently in the overalls, winning my class. So guys, if you're listening to this, and they will probably come on to this, and you're keeping in that loop because you're like, just another one, I feel you, I've been there. And yeah, it just kind of got to a point where it was kind of like, and I'm sure we'll come on to this, enough became enough at that point. And so yeah, when I was competing, it was a good run until it wasn't. My placings were good, but obviously we'll get onto this, it became a bit of a slippery slope.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I remember like your physique so clearly. I think it was when I was kind of getting into the industry, I was like, oh my God, this girl is a freak. And you just had the bikini shape. And I think you see that all the time, don't you? Is like, you look at these freaks, the people that are Olympia, and you're like, oh, they mustn't struggle because they look that good. So like, where along that journey, or did it reach a certain point that it got, really difficult, or were you experiencing everything just like we were, and you looked really, really good? Like, what was your journey like with your struggles through competing?
So I think so much of this now in hindsight, with the work that I do now, it makes a lot of sense, but at the time it didn't. So all I knew, it was after, so I'd come third in Alicante, and that was the first time I hadn't won my class in an MPC show. And then it was very much a case of my feedback was, it's apples and oranges, just keep showing up, any of the top three, you could have been, all of that jazz. Went to Prague and came second, and I just kind of got off stage and just burst into tears and was like, I can't do this anymore. So all I kind of knew in that moment was, I can't do this. Whatever I'm doing to myself, I can't do it. I felt like I was pushing so hard and was just never quite there. And I just thought, I can't do this much longer. So all I kind of knew at the time was I needed to take a step back. I was like, I just need to give myself some space. I need to breathe. Obviously it was tough because it's all I'd known, like literally my whole 6 years I competed for. And from when the industry, like bikini, was only just kind of coming onto the scene. So I kind of grown with it, and it was all I knew. And like, you guys will probably get this as well. As you are becoming very competitive and the industry's taken off, you get a lot of validation, you know, people. And I remember getting off stage in Alicante, and I had, you know, when your inbox maxes out on Instagram.
I mean, I've not been there, but
well, in that one time, I have over 250 messages of people that were watching the live stream and like everything, and it was so overwhelming because I didn't get the placing I wanted. I felt like I'd let everybody down. And I was like, I just need to create a bit of distance here. And then when I started obviously doing that work on myself, kind of realized, hold on, this is what's going on. My hormones are in the toilet. Oh, hold on, I don't know who I am outside of competing. And, you know, I constantly feel the need to control my body all the time. And who am I if I'm not in great shape? And all of the questions that we know competitors come to us with all of the time now were those feelings that I was having. I'd had some little red flags of like, I'd been eating food and then spitting it back out and things like that, where I was like, I would recognize, right, this is not good for me. Because my first couple of years competing, it was fun. It was really good fun. I was like thrived off the bit of discipline. Like, it wasn't disordered. Well, it's not healthy, but it wasn't really disordered in that sense. And then it wasn't fun anymore. It was like, I'm doing a job, and I was going to shows with a job to do to get the pro card. And that's when it changed.
I mean, I've spoken quite openly. I did a solo podcast on identity around this. So this hits a nerve for me because it's such a difficult thing to see when you're in it, when you're enjoying it. And we've spoken on the podcast about how novel that first couple of seasons are, especially the first exposure to it. So what was it, Charlie, that like, was it in the moment in terms of like you observed those feelings, or was it more the more you pulled back, the more you stepped away, you were looking at how you were responding and thinking, actually, that's not okay?
Yeah, so basically, I probably had a bit, when I stepped away from the Prague and the Alicante shows, like that last time, I'd kind of, because I've been competing for so long and had so many kind of like post-show phases, let's
experiences,
say, I'd kind of done that, like, I'd binged after shows in the past. Like, that didn't really happen to me after then. Funny story on a diversion, I actually binged that badly and my digestion was that bad that I ended up in hospital one time. That wasn't fun. But I'd kind of done that. So for me, coming out of these shows, it was more the identity, and I was just lost. I was like, shit, if I remove this from my life, what else is there? And that really, really scared me. So that was kind of what I was facing out of the other side then. And there were little things that like, they make my skin crawl now when I think back to like what I said, but I was a personal trainer at the time in a Pure gym. And I remember we were on a PT brunch out thing. And I remember saying to one of the other PTs, I can't wait until, say, like, I get pregnant and I can just eat chocolate guilt-free. Like, I knew that was like, I can't do that until I have a reason to. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, I can't live like this. My relationship at the time was solely built on bodybuilding. I was like, what have I got outside of this? So I just started working on getting myself like in a good place and trying to work on those things. Like, we went on a holiday right after one of my shows, and I just remember being on holiday in Florida, and all I remember from that holiday was thinking about my body and being like, oh my God, I feel fat. Like, I was I was show condition. I could have gone straight on holiday, and I would hide in my middle in the water park because I felt like quote unquote fat. And that's all I remember. And I was like, I can't live like this. I need to find a way out of living in this cycle. And actually, when I found that place, I was like, I am not rocking this boat because this is freaking amazing.
God, what you said there about the pregnancy thing really actually hit me, because I said something similar to myself not that long ago about my body. So I think when you get pregnant, you're thinking like, right, I really, really love my body, and I've been at the lowest of the lows of my body image, and it's like, God, it shouldn't have to be like that. And I'm sure a lot of people listening are in a very, very similar boat. And what always sparks the thought with me is, how do you actually separate, okay, what is okay to think? None of it is okay or healthy, but when should you actually draw the line when it comes to competing, and what is kind of just like normal post-show struggles that we all go through, versus, you know, something that is like definitely needs to draw the line here?
I think there's the really thing that's really hard, I think, to establish is the difference between common and normal. Because what we'll see is people go in, or coaches saying to their clients, it's normal to binge after the show. It's normal to lose your period. It's not normal. None of it is normal.
No. And
you really need to make sure that you're clear on that. It might be common, but that doesn't mean that it's normal. So it's really important that we don't downplay those things, and that distinction's like really apparent. The things that we might expect is maybe, okay, the odd time that you maybe overeat on your new maintenance calories because your hunger signals are so high post-show because your hormones need to regulate. That is a bit of a byproduct of, hey, you've been restricted for a long time. But if you are continuously binge eating, if you are out of control, if that is causing you a lot of distress, that's a different situation. And a lot of these things might look the same on paper, but you don't actually know what's going on for the client until you talk to them. And that's the distinction. Similarly, like with like body image thoughts, you know, I definitely know people that can enjoy their prep, crack on into their off season and be like, yeah, sound cool. But if you are thinking about the next prep, and actually the only way that you can validate putting on some body fat is because it's for glute gains, but it's okay because my body image is fine because I've put some body fat on both post show, but it's still in the guise of improving your physique. It's this constant cycle of, there will be another diet, there will be another, when I shred it off, and that will be the me that I accept. It's that you kind of intercept and think, okay, what about if there was never another diet? Would that be okay to you? And if that causes you some stress, then you need to start addressing that.
You know what? It's funny you say that, Charly, because it's recently I've put myself in a diet, quite an aggressive one actually. And I'd pulled away from bodybuilding, been quite open about it. I wasn't training for a substantial amount of time, completely pulled away. And I dieted really heavily. I've lost 13 kilo in about maybe 13, 14 weeks. So it's been aggressive as hell. And it has changed nothing at all. And I put so much emphasis on it at the start. And it's actually nice to hear you say it, because that realization's only come now when I'm 13 kilos lighter. And I'm like, this hasn't changed a thing, not a thing. And it's quite scary in this world where it's so physique focused, where everything's got to be intentional. Every step you take, whether you're in off season, whether you're in prep, it's all got to be for a purpose of improving your body. What advice would you give to somebody in that situation where the entire world revolves around your physique? How do you separate those feelings? How do you pull away from that attachment to your physique?
So, like, first of all, like, Jade, in your circumstances, like, give yourself the compassion for that. Like, that was right at the time. Like, and like, you've learned that lesson. Sometimes we just have to learn the lessons, right? Like, and you will take that forward. But I think there's so many facets to what you said there. So first of all, the world that you're creating that is focused on your physique is the world that you've created. So it's the people that you are surrounding yourself with and the media that you're exposing yourself to. So at first, look at like what is it, that the expectations of the people surrounding you, the people that you, or is it the people you value? Like, if you actually surround yourself with people who love you for who you are as Jade and not your body, like your family and like, you know, like your loved ones, probably don't give a fuck if you're like 13 kilos heavier on, right? Because you're Jade. Like, and actually probably they value you when you're in a healthy body, because that's when you're thriving and that's when you're your best version of yourself, even though the fitness industry tells us that that's our smallest and our leanest. So it's not necessarily correlating, right? So I'd look at whose opinions you actually care about. Like, actually that world, be mindful of how much you curate that. Because I think for competitors, particularly, one of the best things that you can do is challenge the whole narrative of surround yourself with like-minded people, because the more disordered the behaviors, the better your result, unfortunately. And that works well for coaches. It works well for the before and after photo, but it doesn't work well for a long-term relationship with your body. If you are curating this echo chamber where your sole worth is how you look, and everybody surrounding you is placing the value on how you look, of course that's going to then influence your behaviors and how you feel about your body. So I kind of start there and kind of diversify in like the people surrounding you, your friendship groups, and then also like start to lean into like, what do you value about yourself outside of your body? You know, it's absolutely fine. We all have preferences for our physique, right? Like I'm still going to train glutes and hamstrings predominantly because that's the area that if I want to see some growth, I'd like to see it. Like I'm still going to do X, Y, Z because of physique preference. But actually, if I gained a few kilos, like I literally just look in the mirror now and be like, oh, right, sound, probably should rein in the snacky snacks. That wouldn't actually change my worth, value, perception of myself.
Yeah.
So I think it's when you're actually tying those things together, you need to realize that that's actually a body image issue and not a body compositional issue. And I think like for anybody listening to this, realizing that those two things are separate is really, really important. That we are fed, and unfortunately the fitness industry again plays into this massively. Like how many people's taglines as coaches in their bio is, I help women lose fat and build confidence. Like,
when it's the opposite. They do the opposite thing. They do in most cases. Yeah.
Hyper aware of our body, placing our worth on our external appearance. The two things might correlate 100%. You know, we might feel a little bit more confident when we're a bit leaner, whatever. But if you are thinking that your worth, or like you said, Jade, that your body image is going to change if you're 13 kilos lighter, you're looking in the wrong place. You need to be looking at your thoughts, your perceptions, the meaning you're attaching to your body, who you're surrounding yourself with, you know, and actually starting to think about what your worth is outside of your body. The best thing I ever did, and the best thing for my coaching business, was actually place my worth outside of my physique. Because if you're a coach listening to this as well, a lot of coaches can stay in that cycle of like, need to do another prep or need to do another photo shoot to stay relevant.
Yeah.
But actually, when you start focusing on what you can give a client, your education, your ability, your self-confidence as a coach is going to skyrocket, because it's not solely just based on how you look.
Yeah, I get that as a coach myself, but the environment thing really, really hit me, because I've felt like exponentially better in myself since moving back to Dublin and being with my family, and not having a physique goal and not having that kind of pressure. And I wouldn't even say my composition has changed all that much, but like you said, it's who you're surrounded by and the narrative that they're saying. But it's interesting you said that. I want to go to the Flourishing Society, and I suppose your particular clients and what kind of motivated you and Danny to set it up, because I feel like the whole chat around all of this is very, very new. You know, we had the Amelia Thompsons and stuff like that, but I think you approach it in a very, very different sense, in that, like, you know, you had been competing for like 10 years. I know Danny had literally only finished up her season and stuff. So where is the motivation for that? Did you feel like a lot of people were reaching out to you, or was it, you know, both of your experiences combined that kind of pushed you to do that?
Yeah, to be honest, it was a bit of both. So basically the premise was that we just, well, before this, let's rewind further. So me and Danny obviously knew each other through competing, and we had similar sponsors as well. So we'd go to photo shoots and we'd be there together, and we obviously would know of each other. And then we obviously came away at a very similar time. So it was like 2019. And we kind of just noticed like we were posting similar content. We were talking about similar things, you know, like post dieting. And funny you should actually say, like with Amelia, so it was me and Emma had this conversation, and Emma was like, why aren't you doing this? Like, why aren't you stepping into this space? And I was like, oh yeah. And then we just started getting ideas. And then Danny just reached out to me because we'd noticed obviously the content was quite similar. And she just voice noted me on Instagram and was like, right, we are on a similar vein here. I've just had this thought in the shower. Why don't we create like a community support group for people coming out of extreme dieting? And that's where it started, was like a Facebook group, and like just kind of free conversations and talking about that sort of stuff. And we just kind of noticed we were both on the same wavelength. And then we just really realized that we're much stronger together. And if we actually want to really make impact and help people, we can do that so much stronger when we come together rather than working against each other. And the biggest impact that we can have is if we get to the root and work on an individual basis with people, but actually educate coaches better to make them aware of this stuff, so that they can get it from the root, so that we're not getting them once they're already fucked out of the other side.
Chewed and spat back out. Yeah, literally.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like, oh, I'm just going to do whatever to this person, and then you can have them and deal with it. Like, it's not fair on the individual. We maybe go about things a little bit better. is completely never healthy? No, it's not. But you can definitely mitigate the intensity and severity of some of the things by the way that you coach.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's kind of, we wanted to address that. So it's kind of gone from being a Facebook community into like coaching education and obviously our own one-to-one work and stuff. We just recognized that there's a ton of prep coaches, prepping these clients to this dark place, like you say, spitting them back out, but also lifestyle coaches that are doing transformations and photo shoots and using the same extreme protocols. We went to a seminar recently and this coach put his hand up and asked a question. We were talking about menstrual cycle function. And he'd been coaching for like 18 months and he did transformations. He was like, how, what weight should I aim for when the girls lose their cycle, when they prep for their shoots? And that was a regular thing for him, that they lose their cycle. It's become so normalized in general population. So we thought, there's so many, like thousands of coaches doing this. There is nobody to support these people out of the other side.
No.
And that's where we're like, we need to step into that space, because we've got the experience in our own experience, but we've been out of the other side now ourselves for 4 years and have got a thriving relationship. We both still train and have, physique preferences. But we've found that place and we've been there consistently. And we've also qualified ourselves in all of the necessary areas to support these things as well. So kind of just
interesting. Do you know, I always think to myself, with all of the, after 3 preps myself, I always get to a place in my off season, and Jade and I talk about it all the time, that everything just kind of settles, and, hunger and the body image gets to a place that it's like really, really good. And then, like you said, all of a sudden you're in a prep again, and then it just kind of goes downhill. So when you work with clients, like, and they're approaching you with all of these things, how can you say to somebody that another prep is not for you? Like, how do you know the person in front of you that, okay, they could prep again if they did the right amount of work, or they definitely shouldn't step on stage again?
It's not for me to tell them that.
It's
not at that point. So say, Grace, you're in front of me and you've got all of this stuff going on, and it's not for me to step in and say, right, Grace, you're not getting on stage again. All we can do is work with what's in front of us. And I 9 times out of 10 guarantee you that once we've done that work, that person will be like, I'm in a good place here. I'm not getting back on stage. Example, Becky Dean, you've had her on the podcast, right? So when me and Bex working together, again, I'm obviously, she's one of my closest friends as well. So I know the ins and outs of where she's been and what is going on with her health. And she was very much like, right, I'd love to, at the end of this, in a year, 18 months time, be in a place where I can, prep again, but actually do it properly or whatever and whatnot. And in the back of my head, I was like, I hope we don't get there, but I've got to honor that, right? And actually, when we've got to place, she's like, I'm not getting on stage again. So it's not for me to actually say to that individual, that's not going to happen, or that's not right for you. They've got to come to that conclusion themselves. Because how many times has a coach told you to do something? If you're not on board with it, you're going to check out. Like, that's the worst thing that we can do. So and if they do get on stage again, they'll have that, they'll have those tools there, they'll have done that work. It's not, that's not my decision. So I never really put the thought in that individual's head. I do the work with them that's in front of me. We get them to a good place, and then that's their decision to make. But 9 times out of 10, they make that decision for themselves.
I mean, I suppose that's what you're unearthing, aren't you? Like, if you strip it back and you take away the competing element of it, take that extreme stress away, who are you beyond that? And all the work that you put into actually building these people back up, because I've been in the same situation in the last 12 months, bottom, and you're like, there's nothing here. There's absolutely nothing here. That's gone, and there's nothing left. And I think having the will and having the awareness to actually put yourself in a position where you're talking to yourself, Charly, and you're having those conversations, you almost owe it to yourself to get out the other side and say, did it help? Did it contribute to anything? But some of the questions I've had, especially around going back to the environment element of it, the external pressures, because obviously bikini division and bodybuilding is so exposed now on social media. It's bigger than it ever has been in terms of visibility, and a lot of the girls that I've spoken to are quite conscious, not necessarily about how they navigate it, but what others might think of how they're navigating it. How do you navigate that with a client? Have you come across something like that? Is it pressures in the actual industry itself that cause these feelings and these emotions?
Yeah, I think, again, a combination, and we've got to come back to actually what is that individual's values, what's valuable to them, and then being confident in making decisions in line with their own values and getting confident in that. Because the more confident you are in that and you are in yourself, the less that what will bother you, and that'll feel weird for them because they'll be like, but this is so loud right now. But we'd work on all this stuff in tandem, because we'd be actually saying, like, I want you to go and challenge, like, go and start muting accounts that are triggering you, start to notice this stuff. Like, it'd be kind of different little things that we're working on, I think, that would be supporting all of that. But I think one thing that in the industry that doesn't help is, and this is something that I say, or we try and be transparent about in our content as well, particularly at this time of year, reminding competitors that when you're navigating post-show or off-season, how well that individual is going through that process, you cannot quantify in that coach's progress photo side by side, or Jade has only put on 2.5 kilos since. That is not a measure of success for how well that individual is doing with their body image, their health, or their relationship with food. So the post-show process, for me, I would much rather an individual, it's like, visually, she might look really different, but you know what? If she feels great, if she's healthier, if she's got a menstrual cycle back, if she's thriving, if she's got a great relationship with food, she has nailed that phase. But unfortunately, we're in this space where it's like, great reverse by Jade, who's only put on 3 kilos since her stage weight, when all we're celebrating is the fat she hasn't put on, and as a measure of success.
And the reality of it is that is the bit that hurts in most cases. If you're restricting yourself to the degree in which you're putting a number on that and a cap on that, and not factoring in the fact that your health markers are in the bin still, that's where it goes so wrong.
Exactly. And actually, really, we want to be saying, hey, we want to be getting body fat on. This is a great thing. We want to be celebrating it, not demonizing it, because actually we should be supporting just a whole recovery phase where we get health markers back up, we get body fat back on, because that's the idea of actually getting your inner surplus, getting the fat back on. But also something that I do, now and again with people that I've worked with for a long time, if I get a client who's like, I really want a challenge and I want to try and get on stage, I will still take them through that process. But they know that I'm not going to be like, hey, let's win at all costs. Like, they know what they're getting when they come to me. So when we do go through that, part of that restoration process for me is like, right, so we need to reverse away from tracking again. Right, so we're going to be intuitive again. That's the point we're getting to. You're reversing out of the behaviors that are relevant for the goal as well. That's part of health. It's health multifaceted. So I think that in demonizing gaining body fat, a lot of kind of the industry, it puts pressure on so many competitors to think that if they've gained body fat too quickly, that they've failed or it's wrong. And actually, all you need to do is stay in your lane and do what's right for you, and try and block out that noise, because you simply cannot tell on social media what is going on behind that photo. So you've really got to remain aware of that.
Like these bodybuilding coaches, they're not going to share what it'll take ages to kind of go through how somebody's hormonal health is, how their relationship with food is, and they're not going to say that this person was binging or anything like that might tarnish their image, and not make them look like a really, really good coach. And I think that's where you come into play. And even with myself, with my coaching, even though I've competed, my morals just are like they don't lie with that. And even I had a client who lost like 17 kilos on her own, and got very, very lean. And coming out of that, like you said, she had gained like 8 or 9 in a short space of time, but all of the other markers are in such a good place. The overeating has reduced, her hormones all back, and it's like that is more important, but it's not spoken about by these big bodybuilding coaches like at all, because it is too much work at the end of the day. Like we say time and time again, like it is a lot of work, and a lot of them are just not willing to put that in. So I think people listening need to consider that as well. But I suppose when it comes to the whole bodybuilding coaches and stuff, like, is there any people that kind of come to you specifically from them with a big issue that has definitely been neglected, maybe with their relationship with food or even their hormonal health, that they're just kind of quite ignorant with, that you tend to kind of like take over with?
Yeah, I think that the biggest things that I tend to find is either long stints without a menstrual cycle, and the individual has absolutely no idea about the impact on their health. So for example, like, and for context, anybody listening, it can be really really easy for a coach to say, oh, it's normal. And if you think about how easy you can back that off, if you do your regional and then you're going to do a pro qualifier and then you're going to do finals, it can be a year. And then you're like, oh, we'll address that down the line. It takes 6 months without a regular menstrual cycle for your bone mineral density to mirror that of a 51-year-old postmenopausal woman. And when you've lost bone, that's irreversible. You cannot build that back. When you
my God, that's made me cold.
I'd say everybody is like paused it there.
Chills.
So it's like when you are starting to show signs of osteopenia, which is when you start to lose the bone, that's it, right? So often I get clients who are like getting injured all the time, or, they're, why do I feel like shit all the time? Why is my libido in the toilet? And it's like, right, you've not had a menstrual cycle for 8 months, and they actually don't even realize the impact of that. And that's the thing that upsets me the most is, if you're going to take a client through this, at least when we talk about informed consent and informed choices, informed consent and choice is about showing the whole deck of cards and allowing that individual to make a choice, not just saying, hey, we're going to diet and you might lose your cycle, but it's pretty normal. That's not giving them informed choice, because you're withholding a really vital piece of information. And if you actually are a coach and you don't know the impact of that, you shouldn't be putting a female through these sorts of protocols. So that's the big thing that I see, and that has a ripple effect in loads of areas, right? Body image, libido, relationship with food, health, etc., training, performance. And then the other thing that I'd probably say is the way that they've gone about with navigating their food. So they've probably spent a long time on a meal plan, even in off season, or the most flexible they've been is tracking, but stick to these kind of foods, or you can have an off plan meal. So the longer that we do that, the harder that is to pull back. And a lot of the time, if they have been binging, a lot of what I see as a coach will be like, oh, we'll try and counteract that by dropping your calories or by going into a fat loss phase if you've gained fat, and that's exacerbated the issue. So a lot of individuals can feel really, really lost by the time they get here, because they're like, I've tried everything, I've tried going on to like 1,300 calories again, I've tried this meal plan, but that's not the answer. Controlling your body in instance isn't the answer. And it's really hard, I think, to get their head around the fact that the restriction is causing the overconsumption, and that's where we need to start.
It's interesting you say that, because the first thing that came into my mind for like such a long time, I've always been on a meal plan. Like macro tracking is simply not something that I have ever done throughout my entire competing journey. I know some people are very different. That's the only thing they've done. But I used to get feedback in relation to choices around off-plan meals and, well, you've obviously done too much, or you've obviously gone overboard, and that negative feedback loop making me feel bad about making choices, when I actually sat and looked at the menu and thought, right, so steak, chips, okay, potato, it's probably like, that's limiting. I want that, but that's limiting. So I've already had that conversation with myself. I've already technically taken myself away from enjoying a meal that I would have actually wanted instead of preferring a meal that is going to, in air quotes, like contribute to my success. So how do you approach unpicking those kind of habits? Because I still think like that now, and I'm 12, 15 months out of the last time I stepped on stage. How do you even begin unpicking those habits?
So first of all, is like acknowledging that, like you've acknowledged that negative feedback loop has come from that, which is the first step. So you can see that actually, okay, these foods aren't inherently bad. That's come from the learned behavior that I've had. So it's not come from you, Jade, it's come from the response. So we can change that response. And a lot of the time, do you know what? Just the way that you say things to clients completely changes their perspective, because they're getting different sorts of feedback now, and that actually starts to reframe stuff. So that's a big thing, is like how we say things in check-ins. But also what I would probably, the first thing that stood out to me there, Jade, is like, even that notion, I think this is something that gets massively missed, even in just the fitness industry. Health is multifaceted. It's not just your physical goal. So if you've actually sat there, you've gone out for a meal with your family, and all you've been thinking about is getting your head in that menu, and you're spending all of this time thinking about what the best choice is to make to affect your body, that's in itself not healthy.
No.
And I think this is where a lot of coaches maybe don't address that. They celebrate that you've made that choice. Well done, Jade, you chose the fish, and that's really aligned with your goals. But they've not sat and thought about, oh, hold on, she's sat there and been completely not present at all in this.
Consumed.
And all she's been thinking about it. Yeah, consumed by food, consumed by choice. So actually starting to actually widen that lens out to like, okay, you know, what else do you enjoy about that situation? Can we be more present? Can we focus on less about the food? It's not just about the food, you know, and actually starting to plant these little seeds about like social occasions aren't just about controlling your food, you know, and just starting to widen it. Also, we probably find, and again, not uncommon, if you've been on a meal plan for so long, you've been relying on an external method to tell you how hungry you are and what you should eat when. So you're probably very disconnected from your body. So actually it'll be a process of like actually starting to reconnect with those signals again. So we'd use different tools, like say for example, I'd say to a client, okay, I want you to go out and I want you to pick something that you enjoy from the menu. It's like gentle exposure therapy, right? This is where the kind of more therapeutic techniques come in, but you're going to now use mindful eating protocols. We would have gone through them before, right? Okay, you're going to use your mindful eating techniques. We're going to refer to the hunger scale, like psychologically, I want you to eat slowly. I want you to focus on connecting with your family. And there's different ways that we would approach that. But to actually support the individual to start getting a little bit more attuned with their own body signals again, and actually being able to stop when they're done and not just kind of think, oh, meal out, let's go off plan.
The stimulus isn't the food anymore, right? So the stimulus is not the food, it's everything else that's happening around you, yourself included. Because I hadn't even thought about it like that. But that meal, interestingly, was the meal that we had following the passing of my granddad. And we all fought to get out there, and all I thought about was steak and chips and making sure that I didn't do anything. So yeah, it's interesting to unpick those habits, because it's things that I would not have been aware of had you not just walked us through it. And I can only imagine how many competitors are making those decisions on a day-to-day basis, completely oblivious to it.
And that's the thing, when that's being celebrated, like I think we lose in all of this, we lose that actually spending that much time thinking about food in your body isn't a healthy place to be. And come back to that of like, actually this is now taken from my life, not enhancing it. And actually it can be quite hard, because sometimes you will go through an adjustment phase when you start to be more intuitive, where you may go out and you may not be able to reach your hunger signals and you may overeat. And actually what I'm not going to do then on the Monday morning at your check-in, Jade, is go, can't believe you did that, Jade, or you obviously did it. You go, okay, cool, let's address that a bit compassionately, like what happened. And actually you stop becoming ashamed about it, and you start to be more insightful about it, and then you learn from it. So you might get that curve where you do overeat a little bit, but then over time sorry, there's a firework just gone off and my dog's just gone over.
That's okay.
But over time it will stabilize. It's about being patient with yourself.
It's interesting you said that. Like I'm at a place now I haven't tracked like in a very long period of time, haven't weighed myself, nothing. And my relationship with food is like, it's always good when I don't track, like 100%. And I know I had spoken to a girl the other week who I sent over to Charly, and she had we were chatting about, you know, my fitness pal, and she was coming out of a reverse and having her own struggles. And I had said to her, I was like, yeah, I've been tracked all year. And she was so shocked. Like, honestly, I think, you know, competitors look at other people who compete and it's like, oh my God, you cannot track, like, and you're fine. And I'm like, yeah, like you get to a stage where you absolutely are fine, if not better than you ever have. And it's like, when you have a client who's in that position, who they know that definitely not tracking is going to be the best thing, but it's extremely scary territory to go into, especially when you're trying to control it post show. And it's like, okay, right, you slip into those overeating habits, and like you said, the first thing is that your coach puts you back into a mini cut then, but it's just putting a band-aid over it. It's not actually doing anything. So it's like, what are the stages when you're working with someone to remove the tracking? Do you immediately just go, okay, yeah, we're going to not track at all and we're just going to intuitively eat? Or do you kind of do like a slow wean off, like taper off it altogether? Like, how would you approach that? And is there like a certain time frame? Like, would you wait until post show is even like done with almost?
It's going to completely depend on the individual. So I could tell you so many different scenarios here of each individual. And this is why you need to get to know that person. And exactly like you said, that you sent, obviously anonymous, that individual over. And this is like, we're still figuring that out now. Is like, okay, where are we? How attached are we to this? And where can we kind of start when we start this process? Because if you've been on a meal plan for years and years and years, it's not going to be helpful for me to be like, right, we're just going to intuitively eat tomorrow, because you can't be intuitive, because you don't know how to read your body's signals. So it completely depends on that individual, and even like how much information they've been taking. Because, you know, things like MyFitnessPal are like a sat nav, right? Like you should be thinking, oh, okay, that's roughly what 40 grams of dry pasta looks like. Like you can eyeball it without weighing it, or, you know, without know roughly where you are without tracking. You should be able to remove that tool. So it's like knowing you've got that knowledge there. If it's like a meal plan, if it's tracking, if you know, it depends where the individual starts. And again, what kind of state they're in coming out of the other side of post show. I think it's not always helpful to rip the band-aid off. I think particularly if somebody's been on a meal plan for a while, you've got to think about things like digestive issues. And if they're going to then go and eat all of these foods and then be in pain and then all of this inflammation, it's not going to be a good time for them. We need to build up positive evidence. So I'd maybe encourage somebody, if they've been rotating the same foods, to be like, okay, cool, with these kind of extra calories, we're going to take your calories up. Let's integrate some new foods. Let's, you know, increase your portion sizes and really focus on getting your appetite regulated and actually getting you satiated and waiting for those hunger levels to realign after the show, because there's no point putting highly palatable food in, because you're probably going to overconsume it. Once you've kind of got out the other side, hunger levels have stabilized, cool, now we can start to include these more highly palatable foods and be like, let's do this in a satiated state. Let's show yourself that you can. Let's, you know, start to integrate to the point where actually, if each week we're integrating new foods, then it starts to fall away from now being those foods on the meal plan, and then say, okay, let's be a bit more intuitive. Let's maybe have 2 days a week where we don't track, and we show ourselves that we can actually just utilize behaviors and structure. And basically, I'd say where I personally live now is like a modified intuitive approach. So completely intuitive eating is where you just eat based on your hunger signals with nothing to do with your body. I will still prioritize 3 to 4 protein feedings a day, and I will still prioritize 5, 7 of fruit and veg, because I value my health and I do value retaining muscle tissue. But everything around that is then intuitive. So it's actually working up to that place. It's going to completely depend on where that individual is as to where we start. And I think that's the most important thing to remember, is everything's a spectrum, and you've got to meet the client where they are to move them closer to health. Some people will be in that overeating side of the spectrum, and some people will be in that I am terrified of increasing my food end of the spectrum. What's going to bring them closer to health in the middle, and where are they to begin with? And that's going to look different for everyone.
Yeah, makes sense. Definitely.
Yeah, it's just such it's a Warren's maze, isn't it? That's the reality of it, because so many people's experiences are different, and they experience different feelings and different reactions to different emotions as well around like that process in itself. Like I think we've touched on it roughly in terms of like red flags around behaviors and things, but what feelings specifically would you say that that's a problem, that is something that you shouldn't be feeling? Not to say that it's invalid or anything like that, but this is taking it to an extreme. Where would you start to raise concerns with a client or somebody that you were speaking to?
With food, or?
With food, body image, like that post-show experience, really, more than anything. Like, where is it that if I was a person reversing out a show now, I'm absolutely consumed, I'm sat in my bed, I'm crying. That was definitely me. Like last reverse, I was crying in bed because my body was changing so fast and I could not think of anything else. At what stage do you, or as an athlete, can you identify that becomes a problem and you perhaps need to go and see somebody and speak to somebody about your relationships?
I think if you're attaching kind of moral value and your changing body is actually affecting your emotions and then your behaviors as a byproduct of that. So you may be, you know, they coexist, right? They intercept somewhere. So if your body was changing really quickly, it was maybe that you were maybe overeating as well, and that's why it was changing so quickly. So they're all kind of a catalyst for each other. So if kind of you're in that situation and you're like, right, my food is out of control and therefore that's having an impact on my body, and then I want to restrict again because now my body is, you know, changing. If at that point you know, that's not what a meal plan is going to solve. So changing your food, going on a diet, that's not going to address the issue. If you're finding that you're attaching moral value or emotions, or there's an urge to kind of really regain that control on your body, you probably need a different approach to what a prep coach can give you. Because realistically, the prep coach approach is to say, right, we'll do another diet then. We'll just lose the body fat. Yeah. So really we need to start thinking, okay, we need to look at all this stuff outside. We need to actually get that regularity in your appetite again. Why are you overeating? We need to address that, because actually that can be multifaceted. Has it always been a bit of a coping mechanism? And actually you've been competing for 3 years to mask that and actually control that because it's been easier. It's going to be completely individual. So, you know, you could be stress eating, you could be not managing your hunger signals very well. You know, something that, you know, I find is that even just the way that you structure your meals. So a lot of competitors will be like, I'm eating 6 meals a day, but they're never reaching satisfaction or satiation. So like they are always driven to overeat. So it's like, right, let's eat a meal until we are satisfied. And these little things that can actually just change the game. So we'd be looking at maybe what's driving the overeating, which could be a multitude of things. Once we get on top of that, that will slow down the changes in your body. And people sometimes struggle to get on board with that. Sorry, there's like a pure firework party going on.
Almost November.
People can struggle to get on board with that because your knee jerk is just control my body. Like that, the answer is get the body fat off. Like I want to feel like me again. So it's important that we do the work in tandem and that we realize, look, the issue that you're gaining body fat at such a quick rate is because you're overeating. So that's what we need to address. Once we smooth that out, that the body is going to follow. And in the meantime that we're doing this work on body image, that we're going, okay, how can you show up for yourself, can be compassionate for yourself, make sure that we are maybe recognizing when we've all been there, oh, my body fat's going on at rapid speed, so I'm going to stand in the mirror and pinch my body fat. Is that helpful? Is it helpful to stand in my bikini front shot and actually look at how far away I am from stage lean? Addressing these behaviors at the same time so that you can pull away from that to let yourself do the work that's actually going to have an effect long term.
Yeah, it makes sense. And what I always have on my mind is, you know, when I'm looking at, like we spoke about Becky and even yourself, you know, people that have definitely hung up the heels, you know, but you do live a kind of bodybuilding lifestyle in terms of, you know, you do train, you have the physique goals, and, you know, Becky still trains and still attends shows, you know, and you are, for the most part, like immersed in the industry still, you know, do you feel that you can, I suppose, fully heal from all of these things and still live a similar bodybuilding lifestyle? Or does it tend to creep in? You know, if you are, like you said, your environment is all competitors and all they're doing is looking at their bodies all the time, is that not going to, you know, cause you to be a lot more physical focused, even though you've definitely hung up the heels? Like, where do you draw the line in terms of that kind of lifestyle? Because like yourself and like Becky, you know, a lot of your friends are through the sport. So how do you separate yourself from that to fully heal, if that makes sense?
Yeah, 100%. I think yes and no. So obviously from the outside now, I get a lot of competitors that'll say to me like, oh, you know, but I still want to train like a bodybuilder, or I still want to, you know, I don't want to like say that I hate the sport. Like, and that's completely valid, because like I don't hate bodybuilding. And like you just said, Grace, like I'll go and watch shows. Like I enjoy spectating it. Like Dougie's still very much in the industry. Like we have friends, like you say, that still compete and will go and support them. But if I actually look at what my life looks like compared to when I was really in the industry, it's completely different. Like, you know, me and Becky won't be talking about anything to do with bodybuilding when we're together, right? Like, it's not the topic of conversation. Yeah, we met through that, but that's not what our friendship is built on. And actually we've got so much else to talk about. So it's kind of like, if when you're around these people and that is solely what they're talking about, and you are still completely just engulfed with the majority of your friendship group are competitors and whatnot, then of course that drive for you to fall back into that is going to be higher. So I think you've got to be kind of, you know, where you put your energy is where that's going to flow. So, you know, it's similar to you guys, like I haven't tracked a macro for like 3 years, like I haven't weighed myself for over 3 years, I'm just not interested in that respect. I don't really enjoy resistance training anymore, I'm not going to lie. I train twice a week to retain my glutes, and I do yoga and I run. Like that's it's what I enjoy. So it looks very, very different. So my level of immersion is like equal to me being a spectator now and not being immersed in that industry. It's not just me doing the same stuff and trying to say, oh, I've just hung up my heels, but I'm kind of still doing it on the sly. My life looks completely different, and I am very much on the outside. Like I go to a show and I'm like, yeah, I'm sitting on the outside of this looking in, and it feels a hell of a lot different because I'm not there with my Tupperware or my cream of rice or, you know, all of this. Like I'm very much, it's a separate world to me.
That makes sense. So you don't go there and, you know, feel more negative about yourself because you're there. You actually feel like more positive, like I'm so glad that's not me anymore.
Yeah, and I can still respect it. Like, gosh, like I look at like particularly competitors on the scene now, like Mia Blair. Like I message Mia every time I see her on stage, and I'm like, hey, like you doing insane, like you look amazing. Like I can still be like, that's nice. But I can equally be like, but not for me. Like there's no part of me. There was definitely initially and this is where you've got to be really self-aware. I think when you step away, you probably will get that pull to go back, and that's where you've got to be disciplined with having a word with yourself. Because I remember when Becky won her pro card, like, oh my God, like in that, I was like, right, I'm going again one more time. I even said to Cal,
yeah, we remember we went for a dinner, I think actually a couple of months after, and you were like, I'm going to go again. I remember that.
And I was like, I think I'm going to do it again. And then I just let myself sit on it for a bit. And this is the story of Dougie's life, because he's like pretty much hung up his trunks. He'll just guest pose and stuff. Every time he goes to watch Elliot Robinson, he's like, gonna do it again. And then 2 days pass and he's like, I'm not getting up for cardio. I'm not doing that. So I think just let yourself take a step back, not live reactively, and just allow yourself to sit on things and actually think, is this right for me? Does this align with my values? What would my life look like if I did that? And knowing that it's all right to say, no, I don't want it enough.
I
think that, like, we drill this thing like, you don't want it enough. And it's like, I'm quite happy now to go, no, I really don't.
I hate these. I mean, it's this time of year now as well, and you'll know exactly what I'm going to say. I hate these like the memes about like spending money on coaching, and you're happy to go out and spend it on a meal and on drinks and allocate it on clothes and this, but you don't prioritize coaching. But that's okay. So if you don't want to prioritize bodybuilding ever again, that's okay. That competitive outlet and that competitive nature can be found elsewhere. And I think from an identity standpoint, pulling it back to that and like stripping away the actual sport itself, the reality of it is you could enter marathons, you could start jiu-jitsu, you could do whatever you want to get that itch out where you are competing against another person and not have to starve yourself for 16 to 24 to 28 weeks in doing it. And I think the industry, especially now, is very, I'm just going to say it can come across so judgmental of people who step away. Like, oh, they don't have what it takes. They haven't got it. They're not all about this lifestyle. They're not prepared to eat sushi and nothing else. Like you can be that person though. And I don't know when it got so shameful to turn around and say, I really enjoyed it, but no thanks, never again. When did that happen?
Yeah. And it's, you know, like exactly as you say, it's absolutely fine. And I think, again, a narrative that kind of falls into that I've faced a lot is like, either, they just weren't cut out for it. And it's like, I can stand here heart and heart and say, I was cut out for it. And if I'd have carried on, and I know I would have gone the whole way, because I was never out of the top 3. My results were going that way. Like I chose to step away from my own sanity. Same with Beck. Like she got a pro card. She's chosen to step away. Like people can step away and still have the genetic potential. Dougie, I know that if he went the whole way, he would be a classic IFBB pro. He's like, no, it's not right for me. Like people can have that genetic potential and say it's not okay. It doesn't mean that they aren't cut out for anything. And it's not this negative that everybody makes it out to be. Also, the narrative of like, if you step away and that means that you're bashing the sport. I think that is another way to just kind of shade people, because it's like, no, like excusing PED use and talking about binge eating and talking about disordered tendencies isn't bashing the sport. It's being transparent. And actually we need more of that, because actually these girls' feeds are full of girls in sparkly bikinis talking about how amazing it is. And we need more people to be actually counteracting that message, because that's all they can see right now. So it's not bashing the sport. It's just equaling the playing field and actually saying, hey, but have you about this as well that you maybe don't see behind that sparkly stage shot, or even what that person might have recognized yet. Because remember that, like, if your echo chamber is that everybody's, you know, competing and whatnot, the most flexible that you may have seen somebody be around food is macro tracking calories and protein. Like that's probably like the most flexible you can imagine, because that's what you're exposed to. But actually that's still not food freedom. And actually, until you actually realize where you can go and you open up that world, you're limited to your echo chamber. So it can be really easy to stay in disordered tendencies, like, oh, it's normal to just post a progress update. I have to be telling my Instagram what I'm doing with my body because that's what people do. Or, you know, it's normal to body check after every training session or whatever, because that's what everybody's doing. It can keep you in a disordered place for longer. So I think the more that we can just talk about different perspectives, and like you say, accept people saying, hey, not right for me, I'm bowing out, but you guys enjoy it. Like I'm
definitely. I really do think like it takes another level of strength, you know, and I absolutely love the sport, but it really, really does take a lot of strength to step away from it. Like, honestly, I just know that decision for Beck was not easy. And I think that is actually probably a lot harder than pushing on for another prep, because you're dealing with that kind of loss of identity and all those personal things and the loss of your goal, but it's also what other people are going to say. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are in a similar boat, and we're definitely not here to say you shouldn't compete. You know, we've loads of podcasts that, you know, are motivating a lot of people to compete, you know, Miss Bikini Olympia and stuff, but it's to get people to think about what they really, really want, and that it's not a bad thing to hang up the heels, you know, if it's for your own benefit. And yeah, I just know that is always, you know, our listeners can, I'd say there's a lot of like an inner anxiety that's not spoken about because of how judgmental people can be. And like you said there, you know, there's a lot on Instagram and we speak it all the time, you know, you're sharing your updates and nobody wants to be that person that says they're hanging up the heels, do you know, because it's like, oh, you look weak, you can't do it. And like you, Charlie, we're very, very close. So, and I'm sure a lot of people are doing really well. So it's battling all that, and I don't want anybody to feel shame or anything. So I've just loved having you on with us to chat about that. But in terms of with people stepping away entirely, you know, what is the biggest thing that you find that they struggle with? Is it the identity side of things that kind of Becky struggle with, or do you find that these things, I suppose, with their body, does that carry through for much longer? So I know a lot of people step away for the purpose of having kids, for example. You know, have you worked with anybody in those scenarios that, you know, they really, really struggle in that sense, stepping away?
What, in regard to then going into like their next phase of life?
Yeah.
So like it's tough, because I think sometimes if you are a competitor and you kind of stepped away and you want to have children, if you're struggling with your body image, like those thoughts are still going to be there, and like if you don't address them, it's still going to resurface. So we can get sometimes, like you said, Grace, about like that body acceptance that comes with motherhood, and some people do, that's really transformative for them, and they realize like, oh my god, if like my daughter had these thoughts about her body, like that would absolutely kill me, and all of a sudden they sort of see their body differently, or they, you know, we talk a lot about body functionality when we work on body image, of like focusing on what your body can do over what she looks like as a sole kind of marker of worth. And all of a sudden, I think that functionality element with when people grow a child, they're like, whoa, my body is amazing. And that supports their body image as well. But I know that a lot of girls can really struggle with their body changing. If they've placed so much worth on their body being lean, then they are petrified of if they then go into a pregnancy or whatever, and then they're like, how do I get that body back, and all of this pressure. And it's recognizing you need to address those things before, you know, that competing, getting to that lean physique never addressed for you, right? Like it's still there, and you're going to keep kicking the can down the road until you actually address those things. So yeah, I'd basically say, you know, making sure that you're in a good place with that, so that you don't just, you know, I've actually noticed quite a few competitors do this, that like they maybe get pregnant, have the baby, and then they go and compete again, as almost to like get back to it.
It's quite cyclical.
And there's kind of always that cycle, and it's like, that's great if like you genuinely enjoy that and you're like, cool, yeah, it's like giving me a lot. But if you're listening to this and you think, oh, it's because I'm trying to control my body, until you address the body image thoughts, that's not going to go anywhere. Like that cycle is just going to keep repeating in a different form. And you know, your body is supposed to change, particularly as a female. Like our bodies are supposed to change through our life. We go through different seasons of life, and whether that is pregnancy for people who choose it, or, you know, just because it's training's not as much of a priority anymore. You might go through your business era. Let's Taylor Swift eras. Like I'm in my business era. Like, yeah, like training's not gonna play as much of a part. My body will look different. Doesn't mean I have to be like, where is me, completely #let myself go. No, it's like, accept my body's going to fluctuate, and that's okay. And I don't have to worry about that happening, because a different body for different seasons of life, and they have a different purpose.
I think it's so important as well to realize and to sort of be aware that things are so temporary. Like they are, like whether it's your body weight, whether it's how you feel about a certain thing, whether it's a struggle that you're going through at the minute, like life is temporary. Things, feelings, the seasons you go through are constantly changing. There's absolutely no reason why you could feel or should feel stuck in anyone's situation. So whether you're post-show now struggling with things and you don't know where to turn, that will change. It will change. Equally, if you're never looking at competing ever again, you get a spark for it, you're in a better place, and you think, actually, no, I'm better equipped to deal with this now, then it's always an option on the table. I think I know I have, and I'm speaking more from my own experience, that things can feel so fixed and so regimented and so still. And if you're not doing what you're being told to do in this sport, then you are not moving forward at all. God forbid. So just, you know, that realization. Yeah.
And your success or movement in the sport, like you say, that if you're not progressing your sport, that doesn't transfer into any other area of life. No. Like, no, it's not that it's like you're going to, when you're in this elite version of your body, you're the better of it. Like actually probably the opposite. Like when you actually go, oh, hold on, if I just pull back, if I've been given 100% to my physique and I pull back 30% of that energy to disperse into other things that are more important to me, you're probably going to, keep a physique you feel comfortable with, but have more time for your family, but have more presence in your business. You know, your progress goes where energy flows. So like if you're going to 100% of energy into one place, then you're going to lose it in other areas. But actually, it's not this case of like, if you are not moving with your physique, you're this failure in other areas of life. That's just what kind of that echo chamber, I guess, tells us.
Perpetuates. It's funny how you say that, because I remember. Sorry.
Go on.
No, I actually sat in my boss's office once after a prep, and he sat me down and he's like, how's the show? And he was laughing at my tan and things like that. I worked in a law firm at the time, and he was like, so are we getting Jade back now? And my heart sunk, because that was the first time I realized that I was taking so much away from everything else around me just to do that prep. So again, it's that realization, isn't it, that actually, so long as you're giving 150% to one thing, you can't have the energy availability to spread that anywhere else. And you end up neglecting so much of who you are, which is why you fall, or I did at least, fall into this complete identity crisis, because it's all gone.
And it's I think what we spoke about it when we had Kerry on, like competing, it fits really well for people at a certain time in their life, you know, and I think you can look back and say, right, competing was right for me then because XYZ, and I've learned from it now and I've come out the other side and it's just not for me anymore. So people listening, you know, like it might just be fine for them right now. You know, they might be, you know, going out with a bodybuilder, or they might be, you know, really, really young and they don't want to go out drinking and they're like, right, I'm going to commit to this for a period of time. And it's like, that's totally fine, you know. But I think what you said there, Charlie, was really, really good one that I'm going to use, is just like those rash decisions. And I can be very, very impulsive with that. I'm like, right, I'm going to decide to do it, and I go. But I think you need to sit with that for a period of time, you know, and sit in your off season for a little bit longer than just 6 months. And if you get that like eagerness to prep, just like sit with the feeling and be very, very self-aware. So I don't think we do that enough. You know, we're always on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next goal. And okay, when's prep starting? Okay, we need to have a timeline. Do you know? But it's like, no, actually just see how your off season goes, see how life goes. You know, you never know what's around the corner. You really, really don't. And Jay's learned that in the last year, and I've learned that in the last couple of months. You just really, really don't know And I'm like, yeah, here's me saying I'm starting prep in December. Absolutely not. That is not happening. You know, you can't plan for life, really.
No,
but also you also don't know what's around the corner in a positive way until you open yourself up to it as well. Like, actually, when you start opening up to different avenues of life, like, you could go down this twist and turn that you wouldn't have even known, but now you've opened up that door, like, you can kind of let yourself go and explore that. And I think sometimes a lot of this stuff can be really heavy, but it's a really, really fulfilling, exciting process to rediscover who you are. And I think we miss something in it, that it's actually, it's liberating, because it's like, you get to figure this shit out again. You get to go and try something and go, oh, maybe that'll be for me, or maybe it won't, or, you know, you just get to figure it out. And part of that incredible fulfillment is in that discovery of who you are again. And it can be
definitely
really
not lose that, you know, even if people are active competitors listening. I think it's so important, like, even your off season. Holly Dabbage is someone she preaches about all the time, is, you know, finding that identity in your off season. And, you know, if you do want to compete again, at least take a little bit of time to find out who you are, you know, to try, you know, different things, to spend some time with family and go on holidays as well. And you don't have to be like in your off season like you would be on prep on a meal plan and stuff. I think that's really, really important. But we won't drag this on for, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, even keep it intact when you're competing. Like, there's so many things to let go of. Like, actually just keep making space for those friends that aren't in the fitness industry, for those, you know, there's no reason why you can't keep in sports you enjoy until you're physically fatigued. Like, making the effort to keep those things intact doesn't mean that you've got these two versions of yourself. And I think sometimes with bodybuilding, unlike other sports, it's like Premier League protocols at Sunday League level. Like, there's no Sunday League level to it.
That's so true.
That's so funny, like, because like a lot of people are acting like, you know, that they are Miss Bikini Olympia, but like Miss Bikini Olympia we had on the podcast, and she doesn't do that on a prep. Do you know what I mean?
She chills. Like, she puts her feet up.
Totally chill. Like,
Interestingly, obviously you guys have Maureen on, didn't you? And I was in LA last month, and I bumped into her in Golds, and we were chatting for like, I literally went over to say hi and get a picture, and she was just like chatting my head off like half an hour. And it was so refreshing, because I was talking about kind of what I do now and stuff, and we all just kind of got talking. And she just didn't want to talk about the Olympia. She was just like, oh, talked about LA, like, and we'd spoken about like, oh, we thought about moving over there one day, and obviously she'd moved from Norway, so she was like, go through this sort of process, and, you know, this is what you need to go and look at. And she was just so much more than bodybuilding. And she actually said to me, like, she was like, bodybuilding isn't my life. Like, I'm just good at it, and I train, and we don't talk about it at home. It's just something I do. And actually, I've got a business outside of it, and when it's done, we'll crack on with our business. And I was like, more people need to hear you say that, because if the people at the top aren't doing this, then you don't need to do that either. And
so it's so refreshing for her, like, you know, to step outside of it. And maybe that's why these people are so good, is that they can step outside of it, you know, and spend time with people that aren't. Because I think if you're so heavily invested, you're just like robot, and you don't hang out with anybody, I think that does more harm, you know. It isolates you from people and just life experiences, which we need, you know, we absolutely need for our overall, you know, mental health and well-being. So Maureen's an absolute legend. Like, she's big inspiration as well. But that's mad.
We loved her. We really did. So to wrap up, Charly, if like Grace said, we won't keep you too long, but from a responsibility standpoint, well, I'll do this in two arms. Responsibility from coaching, like from a coaching standpoint, responsibility from a like client standpoint. What would you advise any listeners in terms of their responsibility and what they're looking for in a coach in terms of longevity? Because we were so passionate about making this sport accessible, and it should be, if you are going to do it for a prolonged period of time, it is unhealthy, but you need to manage it in as an informed and protective way as possible. What would you say a client should take full responsibility for to protect themselves in this sport, and equally a coach?
So from a client perspective, I think making sure that you are doing your research on your coach, that you are making an informed choice with who you choose, that you're having those conversations, and that you're making sure that you may be thinking more than just how can they get me towards this goal, but how are they going to get me towards this goal? And do they care about more than just my placing and my end result? Do they care about me and how they get me there? There are some questions you can definitely kind of delve into. Accepting that, you know, you have to be as transparent with your coaches you can. One thing that I expect from all clients is, and again, this goes both ways, because if the coach isn't providing an environment where the client feels like they can be, then that communication is going to disconnect. But being as transparent with your coach as you can be means that they at least have a chance to support you with those issues if they're able to. If they don't know about it, they can't support you. So making sure that you are voicing these things and that you are reaching out if something's going wrong, etc., etc. Accepting that maybe the coach that gets you towards a certain goal mightn't be the same one that supports you with issues that you might face along the way, and it's okay to move. And this is something that, you know, me and Daniel talk about a lot. It's like, it's all right if you are really struggling with these issues, but you feel like you maybe not ready to hang up your heels, then let's deal with them. And then you might decide, you know what, I'm in a good place and I'm going to go back and prep again. Cool, like that's fine, that's your autonomous decision. But rather than kick the can down the road and keep burying them, address the issues, recognize them, and have the discipline to be able to say, right, that's become an issue, I'm going to deal with that, and then see where I'm at, rather than continuing to bury it forward, because it's only going to be harder to deal with if you keep putting a plaster over the wound and kicking the can down the road. From a coaching perspective, I would say be fully transparent with your clients. If we're talking about informed choice, like we said before, we need to be being really transparent. And I think even just hammering home the severity of some issues might change the way that, you know, I've definitely had conversations with girls where I've spoken to them about the health complications of where their hormones are at, and they've said, if I knew that was the case, I wouldn't have made that decision. So we need to be making sure from a coaching perspective, these clients entrust us with their health, and that's the most important thing that we have. So actually we need to make sure that we are supporting them with that. And if you're not informed about these things, then just be mindful of the protocols that you're putting people through. Stay educated, and being fully transparent. And I think the phrase I really don't like is do your own research. Their own research is you. They've hired you to be that authority, so support them in that. They don't know what they're going to do their own research on Google. Like they don't know how to do that. So, you know, support them with that, play your part. And if you want the longevity as a competitor, you need to be thinking about your long-term relationship with food in your body. And the more extreme the protocol, often the worse you're going to end up. So either make sure that you are getting a coach that has longevity in mind in the way that they're going to prep you, or equally be willing to get the right support out of the other side for that stuff as well before it gets too far.
Amazing.
Love that.
Yeah,
it's so good and so refreshing to have you on. I think we need a good balance of it all, and like you said, you know, we are the people that they're listening to, you know, and we get comments all the time. People are so grateful for the conversations that we're having and digging deep in that, because it's giving them knowledge and knowing what to do if they want to continue pursuing the sport or they need to take a step back. So honestly, such a great listen and perfect one for the first one back. Thank you so much for coming on. But come here, Charly, will you tell everybody where we can find you and all the details on the Flourishing Society?
Yeah, so Instagram's going to be the best way to find me. So my personal is Charly P Fit with a Y, Charly with a Y. On there, you can find us at the Flourishing Society on Instagram. Couldn't get that handle. How annoying. Yeah. So you'll find us there. And you know what? If you're a competitor and you may be unsure, but you found this conversation helpful, just follow the Flourishing Society, because I promise you that just having a bit of a different perspective and a different narrative on your feed will just help you to challenge things and see things a little bit differently. And I think just that diversity will be really supportive for you. You can reach out to me at any point. I would say this, and I don't say it lightheartedly, my DMs are always open, so don't be afraid to start a conversation. There's no obligation to coach. Just having somebody with a different ear may be really supportive. Obviously, if you do want support with these things, it's what I do on a one-to-one basis. So please don't be afraid to get in touch and we can support you. You don't have to do it alone. You will literally be able to work it together. And if you're a coach and you're thinking, oh, I could deal with actually a bit of education around this myself, the next intake of the Flourishing Coach is in January, and we've got a wait list open for that now as well. And we would love to have you on board.
Amazing.
Insane.
So there's something for everybody, you know, if I think that's great that you do the flourishing coach as well. Because I know myself, like I think you can always learn so much. Even if I've been through it myself, I think getting the tools that you have will be really valuable. So that's amazing, the work that you do, you and Danny. So massive well done, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you for having me.
Thank you.